kids are willing to experiment, way more willing to experiment than we as adults give them credit for. Everything that they do is an experiment. Every new experience that they have is something that they've never done before, and they're just trying it out to see what they think about it. As adults, we get really wrapped up about things that kids will like, especially when it comes to food and flavors. But this is not a time to protect them from bitter things or other weird flavors that might be strong and new for them. It's a time to splash around in those things and experiment with them in a fun and playful way. So here is my next activity that we as adults can do with kids to get our kids learning herbalism. And that is to harness that spirit of adventure that kids have and create some taste explorations or tasting adventures that you can do with your kids or with your whole family. So here's how it works. As you learn about each new herb, you're going to introduce that to your family. Maybe before a family meal, maybe in the afternoon when they come home from school to sort of break up the day. Of course, right now it's social distancing, nobody's coming home from school, but whatever, at any point during the day when the kids are getting restless, it can be time for a taste adventure. So what's going to happen is you're going to make a pot of tea. It can be any kind of tea, but don't censor it. Sure, sometimes make it be something that you think your kids will enjoy. Maybe they like peppermint or chamomile or elderflower. But sometimes let it be some really adventurous flavors like calamus maybe, or angelica root, or even blue vervain. And just sit down together and everybody have a taste. The only rule here is that nobody can say that it is bad and nobody can say that it's yucky. We want to be more creative than that. So maybe you say, whoa, this is really bitter. Or maybe you say, it makes me want to pucker my mouth up. Or maybe you say, actually, I taste a little bit of sweetness in here. Did you put honey in? Maybe you say, this flavor really appeals to me and I'd like to have it again. Or maybe you'd say, I'd prefer to avoid this flavor whenever possible. And depending on the age of your kids, you can also share information about what those flavors actually mean as you are learning more and more about the energetics of herbs. In the Materia Medica course, which is part of the Family Herbalist program, whenever we are talking about herbs, you'll notice that we talk about, oh, this herb is cooling or this herb is warming. And we talk about the energetics of the herbs. You can do that with your kids too. You can explain, hey, this ginger tea feels hot on my tongue, or your kids might say spicy. And you can talk about how that means that heat on your tongue actually means that it is stimulating movement throughout the body. And start to get them used to tying the flavors that they taste to actions in the body. It is really inherent kinds of knowledge. It's just that in our culture, we don't focus on that anymore. So then the other fun thing about taste adventures or taste explorations is that not only are you learning about herbs, learning about their flavors, learning maybe even about what the flavor can do in the body, but hey, you could really go bananas with this. You could start to talk about where this plant grows. For example, if you are having rosemary today, you could be talking about the Mediterranean and looking online at pictures of where rosemary grows in places like Greece. And that might be a very different landscape than where you live. Or some of my favorite time, some of the best time comes from Palestine in the West Bank. They call it Za'atar there. And so you can look at how different the landscape there might be from where you live. From here in New England, Palestine has a really drastically different landscape. And if your kids are old enough, you could even start to get into what's going on in these areas politically and what kind of things happen in the people's lives there. And you can focus on things that are appropriate for the age of your kids. So obviously little kids, we might not want to talk about you know, all of the conflict that's going on in Palestine right now, it might be a little too much for them. But if it's age appropriate, you could talk about that. You could talk about where in the United States might have a similar climate. For example, plants that grow in Palestine or Israel might grow really happily in Arizona. We find also that plants that grow in Iran and in parts of Iraq are happy to grow in Arizona too. And then you can start to think about, wow, in these ways, we have similarities with these other countries, and it can build all kinds of conversation starters, especially right now where we're all kind of stuck in our homes. This can really be a way that you can have fanciful vacations, at least in your mind, from what you are experiencing right now. And your kids probably think that what we're experiencing right now is pretty boring with all of the staying home and not hanging out with friends and everything else. This can be a really great window for them to explore, even though we can't actually travel right now.